Hey there, Colonials. Welcome back to another edition of Quickly Colonial. Today, I have, you can see I'm dressed a little bit fancy, and there's a reason for that. I was grocery shopping the other day, and as I was walking through one particular aisle, I heard a little boy down at the other end, and he was humming and whistling and singing a song that we all know. And it just so happened that I was in that same aisle and picking up some groceries, and one of those grocery items was macaroni and cheese. And it just so happened that the song that little boy was whistling and humming and having a good time with was none other than Yankee Doodle, of all songs. And I knew exactly what I wanted to talk to you about today. That song, Yankee Doodle, we all know it. We know it by heart. We're taught it from a very young age. But what does that crazy song mean? What do those words mean? Well, here we are. So, the entire start of Yankee Doodle was the British way of making fun of us. So these British soldiers, they come onto the mainland of America, and to them, they're dressed impeccably. They have perfect uniforms. Everybody is issued the same thing. Their officers are shiny. Everything they have is impeccable. Everything is perfect, right? And then they get here and they see our ragtag army, and they think to themselves, if we just show a little bit of force, we march a little bit in, and they're going to give up. And this will all be over and we can go home. But boy, were they wrong. So, the very beginning, Yankee Doodle. What is a Yankee Doodle? Well, a Yankee is the Americans. That was just a title that they called us. A doodle boy. Doodle boy is a youngster. Not a fully grown man, doesn't know anything. Okay, and so you have Yankee Doodle. You have these American guys that aren't fully grown men, and they don't know what they're doing. And so right from the very beginning of the song, they're making fun of us. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. It wasn't a war horse. It was just a pony. So it's not even a full-grown horse. It's certainly not a war horse, and it wouldn't be able to withstand all the blows and all the horror of the battlefield. That horse would run away. It's not trained, right? And so when you pull on the reins, it doesn't stop when you want it to, or it doesn't go to the left, or it doesn't go to the right. It just doesn't listen. It doesn't know any better. And so you have Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. The American Continental soldiers are going into war. They don't know what they're doing. They're not prepared. They have no idea who's in charge or what's going on, and they're certainly not going to be able to do any damage. Or so they thought. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat. That's a weird one. Why would he stick a feather in his hat? Well, you have all these British lords and generals that are coming into this battle, and they are given these prestigious titles. They are given these medals to carry, their badges to carry, sashes with a badge on it marked from the king. And what do the American Continentals have? We've got nothing, right? And so you're in the middle of a Continental Army encampment. And you went to the last battle, and even though we lost that battle, you still showed bravery. You still showed, boy, this is somebody that is really, really dedicated to the cause. Or let's say that you killed an enemy combatant on the battlefield. You were then permitted, and sometimes, if they were available, gifted a feather. And you could wear that feather in your cap. And that was a symbol to everybody. Wow, this guy, he knows what he's doing. He's shown valor. He's a good soldier, right? So Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat, and called it macaroni. Why would he call it macaroni? What does that mean? Well, let's go back. Like we talked about those prestigious and perfectly and impeccable British soldiers. You have the soldiers themselves, even the lowest of the low, have a perfect uniform. They are dressed impeccably, right? And then you have the generals and the officers of the British military, and they are perfect. They don't even want to get mud on their shoes. And so you have these perfectly dressed soldiers of the world's strongest power, right? These British soldiers. And then you have the ragtag Americans. Sometimes they have uniforms if they were issued them, if they had enough to be issued. And sometimes they're in just everyday clothes. Sometimes they don't even have that. Sometimes they don't even have shoes. Washington himself wrote to his fellow generals, he wrote to family members, and he wrote to Congress that even during the Battle of Trenton, that the enemy would have been able to track them because of the blood in the snow, because some of his soldiers didn't even have shoes to wear in the snow. And so you have this impeccable, perfectly dressed, perfectly prepared army on the British side, and you have this ragtag, ragamuffin American continental side. The British, of course, are making fun of them. Now, during this exact time period, from the 1750s to about the 1790s, everything was British fashion. Who could outdo the British in fashion? Now, the reason the British were trying so hard is because they were competing with the French. And even the French king, even the men would have ribbons in their hair and bows on their shoes, ribbons on their clothes and everything else. They'd be dressed to the nines. Think about it this way. In modern day, you wear a tuxedo, right? You wear a tuxedo to go clean the pig pen. That's what the French and what these aristocracy in the British life are doing right now. You're wearing a tuxedo to go do mundane, everyday things. Okay? So the middle class and the lower class, and especially the poor people, right? They look at these impeccably dressed people that are dressed way too fancy to do even the most everyday mundane things, and they call them macaroni. And so the British soldiers get here and they see the Americans. They're trying the best that they can. The Americans are trying the best that they can. And so when they have their uniform on, right, it's not as good as the British uniform, or so they thought. And so they look down on them. Look how lowly these idiot American soldiers are. Even the officers are dressed like a ragtag, ragamuffin bunch. And so they would make fun of us because of our poor clothes and how poor we looked, and called us macaroni. And so there you have the story of Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat, and called it macaroni. You have these ill-equipped Yankees that don't know what they're doing. They're nothing. They're certainly not British people, right? You have this ragtag thing. They stick a feather in their hat and now all of a sudden they're a soldier, and they certainly don't know how to dress. Look, some of them don't even have shoes. That's what they would think of us. And so they made up this song, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. But once the Americans caught wind of it, then they started to wear that song like a badge of honor. And even at the Battle of Yorktown, whenever the battle was finally over and Cornwallis surrendered, as they were marching into Surrender Field, the American armies were playing Yankee Doodle, kind of like a snub to the British Empire. Yeah, you know what? We are Yankee Doodle, but we just crushed you. So there you have it, my dear Colonials. If you like what you've seen today, please like and subscribe. If you've been with us before, I thank you so much. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. And I'll see you next time. Cheers.